Of Women's View. I'm your host, Anne Morimi, and it's such a pleasure to have you with us today, as always. Today is the day that people are finally trying to file their tax returns. So I hope if that's what you're doing, that you are, managing very well. Today is June 30th, and last minute people tunawajua. But yeah, we're actually mid-year, and it's amazing how fast the year has gone. With me in studio today, I have some ladies, and it's such a great pleasure to have them with us. We're going to be discussing something that is is common and that we need a lot of information about. The topic is understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. So I want to give them this opportunity to introduce themselves. Welcome. I'll start with the lady on my extreme left. Karibu sana.
Asante sana, Anne. Hello, viewers.
Hello.
It just went off the mind. My name is Elizabeth Mtunga. I'm the CEO and founder of Alzheimer's and Dementia Organization Kenya.
It's great to have you with us. I'm always happy when I'm with founders because I know that behind the reason for founding something, there's always a very interesting story. So I'm looking forward to hearing about it. And there's another lady, Karibu sana.
Thank you. My name is Wambui Karanja. And I am a secondary caregiver of my dad who is living with dementia. My mom is a primary caregiver, and I'm also a psychologist in training. And I'm passionate about supporting people with dementia and their caregivers.
Excellent. Yes. You're the perfect people to have on the show. And you know what? I just want to start. This show is primarily for women, although, of course, it has a huge viewership. And it's very interesting because a lot of times caregiving falls on the girls. Yeah. Irrespective of what born you are in the family, girls tend to be more the ones who are very involved in caregiving. You see, we are also living in interesting times where we are having people living longer. And so that's why I guess these conditions are becoming more interesting. Alzheimer's and dementia. So those two are not the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's where we're going to start.
Yeah.
In a very non-scientific way, for a lay person to understand, tell us, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia?
So dementia is an umbrella term that is used to explain changes in personality and behavior. There are many types of dementia, and Alzheimer's is just one type of dementia. Okay. So there are very many other types. There's Lewy body, there's frontotemporal dementia, but Alzheimer's is the most common of the dementias.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's that. So when you say dementia, underneath Alzheimer's is taken care of. Yet your foundation, when you formed it, you decided to include Alzheimer's and dementia because Alzheimer's tends to be the most common type.
Yes. Okay. And we get more people reaching out who have Alzheimer's, although the other types of dementia also they reach out. Yeah. But there's like a group for Parkinsonism. Okay. So those ones deal particularly with Parkinsonism, which is also a type of dementia. Yeah. But Alzheimer's is very common. It's more common than the other types of dementia.
All right. Yeah. Wambui, tell us a little bit about your journey, because you say you are the secondary caregiver and the primary caregiver is your mom. Tell us a little bit about your journey in terms of how did you finally realize that your dear dad has dementia?
So it's a long journey whereby my dad started experiencing short-term memory loss. So it's forgetting the small bits. So after you've done something, you just forget it immediately. But he had his long-term memory whereby he can still remember how to do things, can remember the family. Okay. And he started losing his memory very slowly. And I remember I was still in high school. And it was a very strange and painful experience as a teenager to see my father losing his personhood. So he's this strong person, this selfless person, and he starts losing his memory and he starts being unable to do things he could do. So very painful, and you're sort of grieving the person while you're still with them, right?
Yeah, yet they're alive.
And they're alive, but they sort of like just start changing, but they're still in there. And that's one thing we should always remember, that the person with dementia is always still there. Yeah, so the lack of understanding of what my dad was going through led me to reach out to Elizabeth, which is what I did. I Googled Alzheimer's Kenya and I got Elizabeth's number and I reached out to her.
Thank God for Google.
Yeah, thank God for Google and the internet. And I think since 2016, I've been just supporting here and there with the organization, but also just getting a lot of support and meeting other people who have their parents or their relatives, their grandparents who are affected by dementia.
Yeah. So just to understand a little bit and a little on a light note, there are these people who sometimes go to town and they park their car and then, they go to the bank and they take so long, and then when they come out, they can't remember where their car was, and so maybe they think it's been stolen, and then they go home and only to come back the next day to realize this is where their car was parked. Is that the kind of memory loss we're talking about? Or when you meet somebody and you can't remember their name and you're sure you know it, when you say short-term memory loss, that is a very broad thing. So tell us, what is it that when you see that, just know this is a big red flag?
So even...
And not just a senior moment.
I like that statement because a lot of people then say then all of us then have dementia, because there are times you stand up and go to the kitchen and you're going to pick up a glass, but when you reach the kitchen, you're trying to figure out, what did I come for?
Why did I come here?
And then you're like, okay, let me go back. You retrace your steps.
Yes.
The good thing is you retraced your steps and went back and remembered that this is what I had gone for.
Yes.
The person went home and remembered, this is where I parked my car. So that is a good sign. Okay. Now, if somebody cannot retrace their steps at all, then that is worrying. Because if you cannot be able to say, like we have had this conversation today, then tomorrow you call me and tell me, Liz, you came to the studio yesterday, and I'm like, no. We had a conversation with you and Wamboye, and my name is Anne, and I'm like, I don't know any Anne. Then that is worrying. Yeah. Because they cannot remember. That is the short-term memory we are talking about. Okay. Now, the long-term memory, they remember things they even did in the 60s. Yeah? And it is so clear, it's like it's happening right now. Yeah. And then when we are talking about today, or even we've had an agreement and they did not remember about that agreement, then that is where you start worrying about when their short-term memory is affected. Yeah.
So the inability to retrace and then remember and continue.
Yes.
All right. Yes. All right. And Wamboye, are there any other signs that you notice? Like, for example, in the person, do they tend to forget maybe to comb their hair, or do they look unkempt? Are there other signs that you can look out for which are a sign? And the reason I'm saying this is because there's a lot of denial when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia. Nobody wants to accept that it could be that, So I really just want people to, when you see these things, don't fear and try to put it under the carpet. Just be aware that you need to start dealing with something which you may not be wanting to deal with.
Yes, there are other signs, but I'll first just mention that the behavior we see with a person with dementia is a manifestation of physical changes that are happening in the brain. So just seeing that, just understanding that the brain is changing and there are physical changes that manifest as behavioral changes, that's the first step to understanding dementia. And apart from memory loss, which is progressive, so if the memory loss gets worse, you should be worried. We all forget things. We sometimes have so many things to do, but that's memory loss is normal for every person who has multiple things to do. But when there's confusion, and then loss of knowing your spatial understanding, for example, if you get lost in a familiar area that you're used to being in, that's worrying. There's also forgetting how to do tasks that you're familiar with. So it's when it starts affecting your everyday life that you need help. And help is available, I'd say that. And it's important to get a diagnosis because dementia and all those changes, it's not a normal part of aging. And yes, it's not a normal part of aging, and that's why a diagnosis is important.
I like that you bring that up because basically my understanding is that you know, when you're maybe in your 60s, in your 70s, we all have that grandma, that granddad who is not able to remember the names of people. And initially, it's not such a big problem, but then there are times when it becomes so severe, and you know, it becomes a concern, a huge concern for the family. And another thing that I also want us to talk about is the issue of genetics in this matter, because it's so interesting that I find that even if, let's say, for example, my granddad had Alzheimer's, even when we start seeing the signs in the family, we still don't want to imagine that it could be the repeat of that situation. So is it also a genetic disease, you know?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Why I say yes and no is because there are times it will appear in your family and it has never been before. Other times it will be this generation, and the next generation will have it like that. So it doesn't, and I liked what you also said, that you would think it is somebody who's in their 60s. We are having people as young as in their early 40s who are getting dementia. So we have early onset dementia.
Okay.
So it's not a disease for the older persons. Like Wambui said, it is not normal aging. So it's something that we really need to start thinking about. So just genetics play a role. There are people who have had, like my dad had it and his two sisters. Okay. From what the stories you hear now, when you look back, you're like, actually this was signs and symptoms, but we didn't know what it was because we never understood. And I know because of the stigma associated with the condition, a lot of times we don't talk about it and almost want to hide our loved ones so that people don't know what we are going through.
It's true.
But it's something that we actually need to start having this conversation out there and saying, you know what, there's no shame. We didn't ask to have it. It just came. And so we deal with it. Because if we don't deal with it, then we, even as the caregivers, it becomes much harder for you to cope.
Tell us a little bit about your personal experience, because off air, you talked about the fact that your dad had dementia for 17 years and you got to know about it after 15 years. I mean, those 15 years. That's a long time. I mean, can you imagine 0 to 15 life of a person? This somebody was born, becomes a teenager, goes to high school, and you're trying to understand and get a diagnosis. Those 15 years, how are they?
They were difficult because also I was, like one boy said she was a teenager, I was also a teenager when my dad got sick. And I remember I was in Form 4 and my sister was going to high school, and then he told my sister, you're not going to go to Form 1 because you will wait for your husband to come and marry you, and then you move out of my house. Now, my dad was those people who would pay your school fees for the whole year. My dad was a policeman by profession, very well dressed up, gentleman, had very good memory, remembering things. Then all of a sudden, he's wearing his counter suits. Counter suits were those ones that used to be worn those maybe.
They're so funky.
Yes, with short sleeves.
You know.
And then he wears pajamas on top. And you're thinking, what happened to him? And then he started now selling the cars in parts. So he'd sell the tires alone, the rest of the vehicle alone. For him, it's not the same component. Then he moves us from this house, a 4-bedroom maisonette, stone house, to a mabati house around the corner. And he's telling us, Jesus is coming, we don't need all these things. You're thinking, okay, then if Jesus is coming, we also need to be living our lives. And so we started realizing there's something wrong with Dad. But we didn't know what it was. But since Dad had diabetes and he was retrenched early because of health issues, we thought he was just trying to adjust to being a civilian. And so we were excusing it. But now he started going to church on a Tuesday, and he wakes up and you're trying to explain to him, today is not Sunday, today is Tuesday. But like that time, and for a very long time, he didn't even know I had a 2-year-old. My son was 2 years old then. Told me that, do I look like your 2-year-old son? Then now he started wandering away, disappearing. We can't find his way back. So he got lost like 2 or 3 times. And that's now when when one of the checkups with the doctor after 15 years, and he's really just going down, the doctor asked us, have you ever heard of Alzheimer's disease? And you're like, huh? What is that? I mean, this was in the 90s. And then she tried to explain to us. So we started Googling, thank God for my older siblings. And then they said, oh, actually, this looks like it. And so 15 years after all this journey of not knowing and fighting with him and having such confrontation would really, because I was like, Dad, come on.
It's so upsetting. You feel like,
what is it? Why
this
are
is
you
a
not
serious
listening?
moment.
Yes.
Stop joking,
That's the thing.
Yeah.
But now when you look back, you just realize how, if you had known better, you'd have handled it much better. So of course, it's now that is why I found it necessary to support somebody else, not to go through this journey of 15 years, not understanding where do you start from.
Yeah. And of course, diseases happen to all of us, and sometimes we're not very clear about what causes some of these diseases. But Wambui, do you have an idea so far? Because, if the two of you met on Google, I imagine that you have already done your own lots and lots of personal research. Are you able to contribute and maybe say, these are some of the causes of Alzheimer's, causes of dementia? Just as a layperson, because you're a psychologist, you're not a medical person. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll mention the risk factors and I'll mention the causes of dementia.
Okay.
So, dementia has been there for hundreds of years, but there's not any research that points directly to saying that this is what causes Alzheimer's disease or dementia.
Okay.
But what we know is that Alzheimer's disease and dementia is a disease that causes changes in the brain, right?
Yeah.
And causes them progressively. So that's why I was saying that you need to decenter yourself from the behavioral changes, to seeing that these are actually changes in the brain and the behavior of the person. They can't really help it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a moral choice that they make to have their behavior change. It's physical changes in the brain that happen that cause these behaviors, right? And for risk factors is whereby you have a higher chance of getting dementia. So the highest risk factor for dementia is age. So as you grow older, your risk of getting dementia increases.
Yeah.
But then there's also these other risk factors. For example, people who've had a stroke, they have a higher risk of getting vascular dementia.
Okay.
People who have diabetes have a higher risk of getting dementia. And there's also this heart-brain connection. So if you have problems with your heart, or if you have risk factors, changes that cause with your heart and your brain, it kind of
the two are related.
The two are related.
Heart issues, it's likely to affect your brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I really can't explain it really well, but some of the risk factors is obesity in middle age increases your risk factor of dementia.
Okay.
And there's really good research, and the Lancet Commission last year released the first document not the first, I think the second, that shows that we can prevent dementia, right?
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that we have literature to show that we can prevent dementia.
Yeah.
So because one of the things is early childhood education, which builds more connections in your brain as a child. So it's very good to keep learning and to stay actively learning to prevent your risk of getting dementia. So I hope I've answered your question.
You have, especially because you're not a doctor. You really have tried.
The interesting bit, Alzheimer's affects more women, unlike men. Yes. So a lot more women have Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are yet to also know, I know there's still research trying to figure out why women, but a lot of times they say because of the way we multitask and we do things very quickly, and all those things could be also a contributor. Yeah. And we brag and say it's good that I can
I thought that was a positive thing.
In
terms of the connections.
But also can have an adverse
effect. Yeah.
And I would say that because of the higher stress levels for women, which are deemed normal.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, I was almost wondering if, when you mentioned heart disease and then you mentioned, I just thought, does stress contribute in a way?
Yeah. It is actually, yes.
A major contributor.
Yes, it's a major contributor, although it's not been put on paper and pen, but a lot of times when you ask people, when did you start noticing the changes? Somebody will tell you when my mother or my loved one lost their spouse, or when they lost their jobs, when they lost money. So stress, when there has been a loss, it will also contribute. to them having dementia.
Okay.
Yeah. So how we process our stresses and our losses is very important.
It's very important because you know what? One thing that you can be guaranteed of in this life is that you'll be stressed.
Yes.
So the issue is how you basically how you deal with it. Because sometimes our lack of dealing with it is what causes all these internal problems, and then the body deals that way by getting sick, you know. Yes. So I think it's very important that we all learn how to really manage our stress and look for ways of coping that are healthy, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things that lay people talk about Alzheimer's is that it's like life is a circle. You know, you start as a child where you can do anything, and it's like if you grow old and then you get Alzheimer's, it's like you deteriorate back into a child, just that you're an adult, where, you know, eventually everything has to be done for you. And I feel that is a major reason why people don't want to accept and to deal with Alzheimer's, because what does the caregiving entail? Of course, it depends on the stage.
Yes.
The stage. And you see, this is a degenerative disease. It starts and then it keeps getting worse.
It's progressive.
And a point which is where it becomes very, very difficult. Do you think that's a reason why people don't want to accept?
In a way, yes. It's a very difficult journey. I mean, like you say, but the person is still there, even if they are not able to do a lot of things for themselves. Sometimes their non-verbals will communicate and tell you that they've understood. Even if they're not saying, you are being mean to me, there's a way they'll communicate. They'll hit you, they'll click, they'll say, you know, they are still there. And that is why we tell a lot of people, watch your non-verbals when talking to them, watch the tone of voice that you use, watch just how you handle them. You may think, they don't understand what I'm saying. So when people come visiting, so how is he? Oh, you know, last time he did. And you're having a conversation in their presence.
And they can hear, right?
They can hear everything.
Yeah.
Because hearing is the last thing that goes.
Yeah, by the way, I've had that.
Yes.
So all these things that you say about them in their presence, you know, is it uplifting or is it depressing?
Exactly.
You really have to be careful about that. Already I'm sort of getting to indirectly the tips of how to manage. So be careful about the person. They are still there.
They're still present.
Yeah.
And they can hear. Though they cannot maybe
verbalize or say, this, I don't like what you people are saying about me.
Yeah.
But they are there. So we need to be very careful how we handle them.
Yeah.
And we cannot say they are behaving like children in their presence, because that is really demeaning. I mean, even they themselves wouldn't want to go through this journey.
Yeah.
So we have to be very sensitive in the language that we use in their presence.
That's right.
And I just want to add on to like Elizabeth's experience, where they got the diagnosis of dementia after 15 years of her dad living with dementia, right?
Yeah.
And I'd just like to mention that it's very important to get an early diagnosis of dementia, because if you get it early enough, it's possible for the person with dementia to live well with dementia. It's not the end for your life. You can still do something. You can, a person with dementia is still there, right? And we don't move them to our world. We get into their world and try to visualize and understand how their functioning is, right? So I will say that the reason we need to encourage people to look out for the symptoms of dementia and to get an early diagnosis, because when you get a diagnosis early enough, you can do advanced care planning.
Okay.
And just because you understand what dementia, you know it's progressive.
Yeah.
But then there's still things you can do. I know people who have dementia who still drive, who can still go to work, they can contribute to society, and their skill set,
Yeah.
because it's at the very beginning when it's been diagnosed, when there's short-term memory loss, it's just memory loss. Those people are still in work, right? My dad was still a teacher when he had dementia and he could go to work, but then when he couldn't do his task, he had to get early retirement. But for a long time, he could still do his work, and it's important that we create awareness of dementia among both healthcare workers and workplaces and communities, because I know, and probably like we might not get into that today, we know that probably like people with dementia, with early symptoms of dementia in the early stages, get workplace discrimination because
of the way the behavior is, the way they are exhibiting,
and lack of understanding.
Yeah,
right?
so people
But
tend
it's
to
not
avoid
only
them.
work, even church.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Even at home. You're going to find that, let's say if you're a big family, you'll find people tending to want to avoid you or to get someone to take care of you. You know, there's an isolation that comes. And I think that isolation can be felt by the person. And yeah, you're right. What I'm wondering also is, okay, early diagnosis is important, like you've said. Is there a treatment that can prevent the rapid deterioration, like slow down the progression? Because you see, we said it's progressive. So
I'll just jump in.
Jump in.
And I'll say there's medication.
Okay.
And it might slow down.
Okay.
The symptoms of dementia, but it does not prevent the deterioration. It will still get worse, right?
It will get worse. Maybe it will take longer.
It might take longer, but it will slow down.
It will slow it down for a certain bit, and then when you reach it will be like a peak, and then there'll still be the drop.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say
it's good to have the facts so that your expectations and you're able to manage. Yeah. Okay.
And I will also add that there are other activities that are more effective than the medication. So for example, staying active, physically active, exercising, improves your cognitive functioning. So for people with dementia, there's research that has shown that continuing with physical activities can be more effective in slowing down dementia for people with dementia. Yeah,
without taking medication.
Somehow
physical exercise. I've had there's a very good link between physical exercise and the brain in terms of slowing down dementia, even before it starts. Because I think the genetic aspect of it basically means that if you're supposed to get it, you will get it. Let's say if you're supposed to get it at 69, let me just take it far away. You can make it come at maybe 75 if you do exercise. So it's like you can delay the onset just by physical exercise.
And not just exercise, it's also loneliness and staying socially active and reducing stress and learning new things. Okay. Literally, the brain is something malleable that you can keep changing every day. Okay. And understanding that your brain is something that, you can physically, literally change your brain and increase connectivity in the brain is something that people should be mindful of, even young people like us, right? Yeah. So staying active, staying social, staying away from excessive consumption of alcohol and smoking.
All those affect the brain.
And a lot, So if you have the risk factor in your family, and you have diabetes and you're smoking and you're drinking, so your risk is higher. But even if you have the risk factor in your family, but then you're living a healthy lifestyle and you have less stress and you're connected and you do all these things, you can reduce your risk. You can reduce your chance of getting dementia. You might not even get it. Yeah.
And Elizabeth, I have a bit of a technical question because sometimes when children are little, they have Alzheimer's, they have autism. Yeah. And autism is interesting because depending on where you are on the spectrum, you're able to, you're able to activate the brain backwards through occupational therapy, speech therapy, so that the parts of the brain that are not really working, it's like you get them to work, but in a different route, like the back route. Yeah. Does that work for Alzheimer's? Because I wonder, should the patients go for speech therapy? Should they go for occupational therapy? Or how come we don't hear about that for people with Alzheimer's?
Well, because it happens out there. It's only that it hasn't started happening here. Okay. And those are some of the things that we are actually trying to bring on board and start working with speech therapists and occupational therapists. But it actually works because we have seen from studies done out there, or even when you speak to other people who run associations out there, it works. Okay. But a lot of times, like I said here, because of stigma and everything, even when they go to hospital, you'll never even know that they went in because of dementia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't even have data in the first place. So even now, when you don't even have data, then where are we going to start saying we need speech therapists, we need
Yeah.
occupational
Without a
therapists
diagnosis.
without a diagnosis?
Yeah.
So that is something that once people now start speaking out and telling us, actually, we have this number of people with dementia in Kenya, for example, then we will be able to now use these other forms of help
Yeah.
to support. But we have been using music therapy, we've been using art therapy to just work with the people living with dementia. And we have seen changes. There's a lady, one of the times she was coloring, and I told her, you're holding color red. And in her mind, she remembered the song Lady in Red, and she started coloring as she sang Lady in Red.
Wow.
So for her, just telling her, this is color red, and then in her mind, this is what clicks with color red.
Yes.
So some of these things actually, even, and you can do some of these things with your loved one.
Yeah.
You don't really have to, go out there. Just things, which is the music that reaches out to them. Is it the music of the 60s? Then put for her and let her just dance along with music. So some of these things, just being very, it's difficult,
mindful.
yes, but being mindful
yeah.
that there are things that you can do and that will make a change in somebody's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do find that people with Alzheimer's tend to have very long days.
Yes.
And days that are very idle. And of course, I can imagine that inside themselves, because they're still with us, they tend to feel bored, non-stimulated, alone, maybe like rushed and everything. And I think all those things can only make things worse.
And that's why it's important to have a schedule.
Yeah.
Have a schedule where you put in activities to fill in the
to fill in the days, because the
so
days
that
can
the
be
day
too
cannot
long.
be boring.
Yeah.
Have physical activities, have art therapy, have something that they're doing all the time. And then also reduce the hours that they sleep, because now when they sleep too much during the day, then at night it becomes a problem. Yeah.
Okay.
So having a
Mamboy, I
schedule.
can see you dying to jump in. Please jump in.
And like what I want to say is that we can't cure dementia at this point. There'll be in the future we can, and I believe so. But the person with dementia can live well, and it's that you remember that this person had a functional life before. They were a teacher, they were an architect, they were doing all these other things.
Yeah.
And when you take that away from the person, you literally are making their life more frustrating for them and empty, right?
Yes, yeah.
And when you talked about loneliness becoming a risk factor for dementia, it will also make the person deteriorate faster, right? So first of all, awareness. Awareness in your family group, and to just tell the person, treat this person like they were before, and treat them with kindness and respect. And once you do that, once you center them in their own care, you can do the activities even that feel that they're not important to you, but they're important to them. You can sing, you can dance, you can do art. And it's about living well, right? It's not curing, because once the person with dementia lives well, then even the people around
can
them
even have some sort of peace
and can understand them, and you can be more mindful and caring in the society view. Really, just live in that space of the person with dementia. It's like it's a point of empathy when you get to actually not live your fast-paced life the way you're used to. You're running from this to this, but then you put yourself in the shoes of someone who has a neurodegenerative disease, right? They're losing some of their functionalities, but they're still in there. And like as I was saying, awareness and kindness.
And I usually wonder, I don't know, do you have some insight, Elizabeth, about how it is for the person? Because a lot of times you're not able to connect with that person. And what is usually going on for them?
If the same frustration you're going through is the same frustration they're going through. Because I remember my dad would keep hitting his head and saying,
they have that.
Something happened to my mind.
He used to say
but he couldn't tell you, this is what happened to me. And that is why we tell you, being, like she said, kindness, being mindful. Don't come and ask them, do you remember me? I mean, all your faces look the same. So please come and say, my name is Elizabeth, I'm so-and-so's daughter. If he remembers you, well and good. If he doesn't. So
don't make a big deal about it and then start saying, oh,
they
and
can't
now it becomes about
me.
you.
Yes.
How can you not remember me? You know, you basically shifted all the attention from them
them to you.
Yes.
And then they're also still there,
Yes.
and they can see that you're upset, you know.
So the frustration, the same frustration you're feeling is the same frustration they feel. So be nice, be kind.
Yeah, be kind.
Always remember, even you yourself, you wouldn't want to be there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't. So put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
And see if somebody came and asked me, do you remember me? And you're struggling to remember. Would you like that?
No, I wouldn't like that.
So
And
it's
therefore,
always remember.
I wouldn't want
always,
to.
to do that to somebody
Project
else.
that onto somebody.
So it's the same frustration that
Yeah.
they're going through. Yeah.
You know, Amboy, one of the things that I'm so happy about you being here is that you have accepted as your family, and you know that your mom is the primary caregiver and you're the secondary caregiver. And I'm already so touched by that situation, because what I find in a lot of families, and I'm not being judgmental, I'm just saying that I've seen even on social media people talking about how even big families, you find that nobody wants to be the person staying with the person, for example. What can you say about that in terms of, you know, for you, I celebrate you because in fact, you've even given yourself that title where, you know, part of my life's work right now is to take care of my dad.
And my mom.
And your mom, to help her, because your mom is also taking care, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that I don't know if you have siblings, but do siblings support each other in these roles?
I will say there's ambiguous loss in dementia.
Yeah.
And this ambiguous loss is different for everybody, and for the journey of acceptance in a family is different for everybody.
Okay.
So you'll find that one of the children in the family takes on the full role, runs around to the doctors and does all the work.
Yeah.
The other one retrieves and goes back and is probably depressed because they can't deal with this ambiguous loss.
Yes.
Another one literally finds another solution, and there's conflict. So one of the things we talk about dementia is that it's a biopsychosocial disease. And the social part is that when the person gets ill, the social part of that person's life is affected. So even the family, sort of the dynamics change.
Yes.
So the children will take it differently. And it's a very difficult space whereby there's conflict because you think that my dad should be taken care of this way, and this other person thinks this way.
Yeah.
Right? And there's that lack of consensus.
Yeah.
So it's good to hold multiple difficult family meetings to get to a point of acceptance and understanding of what's going on.
And to know how everybody's dealing. You know, I'm just admiring how you've answered that question. I mean, when I look at you, I feel like you're pretty young. And I'm like, you're so mature. First of all, you're not even judgmental. In terms of, you've already said that people handle it differently. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes a lot of resentment comes in because the person who tends to take the bigger role tends to feel like everybody has watched them. And they're running away, even the bills are left on them. And I'm so happy that you have basically said that is a very real
And then just one thing also to add on to that. A lot of times we think by taking, let's say it's our dad who's unwell. So one boy brings him over, then I get tired, I take him over. That movement also is very bad for the person living with dementia.
Really?
They need to stay in their surrounding, where their home is. Do not move them. If you have to go, you are the one to go to them. It's not them to come to you. And so a lot of people, we make that mistake and we keep moving them. And it's because of the fatigue of caregiving. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. Remember that the more you keep moving them, the more you disorient them, and the more they have the dip happens. They go down faster. So you have to remember that you go to them. It's not them to come to you. So a lot of times, and then another thing also, when they start talking about they want to go home, a lot of people are thinking, why are you saying you want to go home and you're in your home, for example? So, and then now, another thing that you also need to understand is that when they're talking about home, it's the home where they grew up, when they were young.
Oh, like where they grew up, their childhood. They're like family of origin home.
And also, and also that.
And how do you do that? Because it can be a bit tricky.
It is.
Because, for example, if it's out, it's in shags. I mean, are you going to leave them there by themselves? Especially if you're all in Nairobi, you know.
No, I was going to also add that home does not necessarily also mean that they have to go back home. It's a space where they feel comfortable, accepted, and familiar. And it doesn't have to be the place they grew up in. It just you have to create that home, that feeling of home.
But sometimes they also go back when they're talking about their parents and they're over 80 and they're telling you, my dad was here right now.
No,
Yeah, I know. You're just like, okay, trying to play along. And you're like, how long can I maintain this facade?
And they're looking at you here to just see. So
it's actually a very tricky situation. But, okay, so one thing you've said is that it's better, as much as possible, try and go to their family of origin, or rather their home of origin. What about caregivers? Because another thing that happens is there's usually a lot of change. You know, today it's this person, they get tired, then you get another person, then you get another person, and not even now just family, but just like a nurse or somebody to be with them the whole time. Does that change also affect?
It does.
Okay.
But sometimes also, it's unfortunate that you may have to do the change because sometimes also it has reached a point where the caregiver is no longer as caring.
Yes.
And they're not as passionate about it anymore. And so they feel frustrated also, which is human.
It's human.
So there's also the fatigue of caring for your loved ones. So, but that affects them, the changes.
The changes
so
affect
try
them,
and get somebody who has love in the first place, if you can.
Capacity,
love. The rest of the things they can be taught.
Love is really the
It's
main
the main
ingredient.
thing, because that will make you stay with that person for as long.
Exactly. When I look at you, you don't look super stressed yourself, because a lot of times the person who is giving that care gets to be very stressed. How do you take care of yourself?
First of all, like, just surround yourself with a community who, when you talk about the frustrations you're going through, you don't seem crazy because they're going through the same thing. And so, like, and that's why
like people in the same journey, which is why I think you formed the association.
And that thing I was going to add that the treatment for dementia, the neurologist will give you the diagnosis, right? And they can do so much after that. They might help you if you experience sleep problems or behavioral problems, but that's the much they can do. The bigger work is in planning about where this person stays, who takes care of them. It's very expensive. So
I like that you bring that up. And expensive not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time.
Time,
because you're not going to dump this person somewhere and then just give them everything they need, yet lack that community and social networks, you know. So it's an expensive disease.
And once, and I've had this from other caregivers, once you find that community, once you find someone else going through the same journey, the loneliness of that I am not actually crazy, like what I'm going through is real and someone else is going through it the same way, makes it just a little bit easier.
It makes it a bit easier because you're not so, you don't feel alone. Time is not on our side, ladies, and I'm just thinking we need to give like, you know, what would be your clarion call, Elizabeth, because you formed the association. How old is the association and what are the challenges and how can people assist?
Okay, we started in 2007, but then it was not an NGO, but in 2016 we became an NGO.
Okay.
So a lot of times we don't have funding at the moment. We do a lot of things from our own pockets, but let me tell you, it's worth every day to just help that family and just see a smile on somebody's face. So my clarion call would be, let's go out and start speaking about dementia. It's not an embarrassing disease. Don't be ashamed about it. And you can always make a difference in that caregiver's life. You don't have to be a family member. You can just be a friend. Just go in there and just say, today, go and have a cup of tea as I help you with what you usually do, just for them to have that breather so that they're able to give better care. So let's just be mindful of each other. And I know now with COVID, it's harder. It's much harder. But let's always remember that there's somebody who needs your support. And you can just go and give your love to them. And they will appreciate that.
Wow. Wambui, tell us, give us your parting shot.
My parting shot, Elizabeth won't say it, but the website is alzkenya.org. If you have something and you can donate, donate to the organization, it goes a long way in supporting and going a long way. My other parting shot is that because of the stigma, people think it's witchcraft. Dementia is not witchcraft. It's a disease of the brain. And once you understand that, you start being understanding and not blaming the person. I think witchcraft can only do so much, but when a disease happens in the family, it's support, it's love, it's care, and looking out for each other. So stop looking at families and telling them they are bewitched.
They have a curse.
Yeah, it's painful. It creates burdens in communities. Just understand they don't choose to be in the situation they are in, and it's a disease that can happen to anyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That has been such an awesome moment. And, you know, viewer, if you're there and you are wondering what could be happening to a loved one, don't forget that it can start as early as 40. Please feel free to reach out. You've got the website, and also if you Google, just like Wambui did, you'll be so surprised that you're going to be able to get in touch with Elizabeth and the community in general that is there to support us. You know, now that we are where we are at, it's our turn to take care of our parents. So people, if your parents are going through this, do not be discouraged. Instead, look for support. Look for support, and let's just give back a lot of care to our parents, the same way that they did to us, not out of guilt or out of duty, but out of love, because really this is something where only love can actually help families and people to be able to go through. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been so awesome having you today. Remember that we are on social media handles, GBS TV Africa, on YouTube and on Instagram, and also on Facebook. So you can be able to give your comments and ask any questions. We'll be able to get back to you. Thank you so much. And from all of us, it's a goodbye for now. Bye.
Bye.